We have an update on the active shooter situation at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. Providence police say multiple people have been shot in the area of the university. They're advising residents to shelter in place or avoid the area until further notice. This is an active investigation.
A man is walking down Hope Street in Providence. He isn't running, he isn't yelling, he isn't panicking. He looks like everyone else walking through the snow. But he isn't a pedestrian, he's a hunter. Afterwards, 2 students are dead, 9 are wounded, and the man responsible, he vanished.
Most active shooters cases, the suspect is either in custody, the police neutralize him, or they neutralize themselves. This is one of the rare cases where we have an active shooter and the person actually got away from the scene and we have no idea who they are.
So he's clear, he's methodical, he has no panic, he's deliberate with his violence.
And if he hasn't taken his own life, he's a threat to public safety.
Hill of Justice is sponsored and produced by Jermaine Delmas Studios.
Welcome to the channel where we break down America's most shocking cases with expert insight and evidence everyone missed. Saturday, December 13th, 2:00 p.m. A man is walking down Hope Street in Providence. He isn't running, he isn't yelling, he isn't panicking. He looks like everyone else walking through the snow. But he isn't a pedestrian, he's a hunter. Afterwards, 2 students are dead, 9 are wounded, and the man responsible, he vanished. We're in day 4 now, and there is no longer a panic response going on. When the FBI releases videos, but no name, that tells me a little something. It tells me that law enforcement knows more than what they're saying, and they have now shifted the pressure officially onto him. Because shooters don't disappear, they transition. I'm Jerome Hill, former police officer and state investigator, and with me is retired Sheriff Victor Hill. If you don't mind, please subscribe, comment, and like and share this episode. So for 24 hours, the world exhaled. The FBI raided a hotel in Coventry, and they nabbed a 24-year-old man. He was handcuffed, and officials went on television, they went on X, and they spoke with confidence. And then silence. The evidence didn't match at all, and the man was released. And that's when Providence realized something terrifying at that moment, that the shooter was never in custody. And this is what we call a false confidence trap. Law enforcement wanted closure fast. The public wanted reassurance even faster than that. Meanwhile, the real predator was likely watching the news, sticking its middle finger up and seeing them get this all wrong. Brother, this is where we're at.
All right, let me say this, and I know you're going to find this hard to believe I'm going to say this. Here's one thing I got to say that I'm glad they did. I've seen cases where law enforcement is wrong and they don't want to be wrong. So they'll keep an innocent man in jail based on the politics, who's in charge or whatever, or they'll press forward like they got the right guy when they've got the wrong guy. And that's horrible because you got an innocent person in custody, number one. And number two, whoever did the killing or the raping or whatever is still at large and a danger to the public. But we've seen cases like that over the years. So we got to give them credit that once they were wrong, they admitted it and they released this guy. And they're looking for the actual killer because the politics can get that crazy where it's more important to be right than it is to be right even though you're wrong than it is to get to the actual truth of something. And I think you and I even covered some of that when we were talking about a murder case back in Atlanta a few years ago where it's obvious this person, he may have done some but didn't do all. So why throw all of the cases on him when there's still a killer out there that needs to be caught? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are deep into day 4, we have been able to see some footage, and unfortunately, uh, not only do we not have even a person of interest at this moment, we were able to see something that you talk about often on this show, and we talk about pre-attack indicators. Well, I looked at some of the footage, and obviously, I saw a pre-attack walk. So we had this guy around 10:30, and it's cold up there in Providence. You know, he is casing the entire campus. He is able to go ahead and see what egress, ingress looks like, and he is walking throughout the residential area. Now, the residential neighborhood is very affluent, and he was able to find what we know to be a soft target. So he's doing this over and over and over again. He's testing camera coverage. He's mapping all these blind spots, and he looks at this one building, is the Boris and Holly building. And the reason why I feel like he knew to go after this building, not only because of the cameras, but because it's finals week. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it's a soft target, and there are unlocked doors, and you have distracted students because it's finals, it's the end. And that's exactly what he was doing. Some of the pre-attack indicators that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Let me tell you what's interesting about this case. Most active shooters cases, the suspect is either in custody, the police neutralize him, or they neutralize themselves. Most active shooter cases, they're not really trying to go home that day. It's very rare you see an active shooter where, okay, I'm going to do this and get away with it and come back and do it again. Usually there's some type of mental health, emotional, whatever, where they're going to commit suicide or do what we call copicide, force the police to kill them or whatever like that. So they're not really planning on coming home anyway. This is one of the rare cases where we have an active shooter and the person actually got away from the scene and we have no idea who they are, and days have passed by. I'm not saying it's the only one. I think the last time I remember something like this, but it was spaced out anyway, was the DC snipers. And of course, they were snipers, so it's not like they were doing massive shootings at one time. They were doing it here and there, and it was very terrifying for the people in that area. But that's kind of unique here. And you wonder, was it a fluke that this person got away and he wasn't expecting to escape anyway, and now here he has? Or, it makes you wonder. We don't have an answer to that. Now, let's just say that what we've known to be true is true. He may not even be alive. He may have gone somewhere and taken his own life.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because let's go ahead and talk about why the FBI would go ahead and, let's just say, if they did have a name in mind. What we do in investigations all the time is we are not going to say the name. Why we're not going to say the name is because of flight risk and because of them harming themselves. It gives it more credence to that. They showed the video. And why does Providence Police and the FBI show a video? Well, they're showing it to go ahead and put a behavioral constraint on them, to have them understand that, hey, guess what? We want to see what type of behavior you'll do now that you know that we've gotten some eyes on you. Because what they use is the extension of the public as a videography on this individual. And so I want you to talk a little bit about that, because, we know this to be true while we don't say certain things as we're giving press conference. But this is some of the strategy that the FBI is employing.
Yeah. Now sometimes you don't know who the person is, so you put the picture out in the public, becomes your eyes and ears. And then it comes a time where you know who they are, their ID. So now you still put their picture out and you say their name. And for two reasons: A, it makes it quicker to catch them because everybody knows their face and stuff now. And it makes it hard to them for escape. But also, is to protect the public because the public needs to know, hey, this guy's out and he's armed and dangerous. So if they see him, they know to protect themselves or to shield themselves or to dial 911. So that's why those particular things are done. The only time that you can really use that type of stuff is if you got a situation like you got a serial killer and you don't really know who he is, and there's certain information you put out or certain things you do because you're trying to get him to show himself or do something so you can identify him. But the first step in anything is to ID the person so you
Right.
know who you're looking for. And
And
then
I think
once
that's where the misstep is
exactly
here with the
right,
FBI. Initially, when they got somebody else initially, they knew they lost precious time.
right, right, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
and then you have somebody who's methodical. He takes a 9mm handgun. He has multiple magazines because he was able to fire 40 rounds. So he's clear. He's methodical. He has no panic. He's deliberate with his violence. So he's definitely out there trying to go ahead. The only thing he did rehearse was basically the entry points and getting out.
Well, let me tell you this. So the main problem with this now is this can only end up three ways. Authorities can identify him and arrest him without incident, or if he wasn't planning on getting out of this alive and surprised anyway, he could go out in a blaze of glory and try this again someplace else. So the public is at risk as long as he's out there. Or he's already taken his life. Now, I've worked several situations. One stand out to me in particular where we had a person that went into a house and tried to kill his girlfriend and some other people and left. And we couldn't find him for years. And I mean, his parents said we hadn't heard from him, he hadn't called, and we just thought it was odd. I think a lot of people thought that they weren't being truthful, but they really were. The family lived across from a wooded area, and 3, 4 years later, they cleared that area to build a subdivision. They find bones. They find a handgun. It's positively identified as him as through dental records, and that gun is positively identified as the gun that was used to shoot her. She survived, by the way. So immediately after he did this shooting, he went into the woods and he took his own life. So you got a whole agency going to his parents' house, going to the places he's known to frequent. Nobody can find him. Nobody can figure out why. Well, that's why.
Mhm.
I think where the ball was missed is that's probably a situation where, he was on foot. I guess they assumed he got to a car, but that would have been a good time to use a bloodhound to see if you could have tracked what his last steps was, even if it was someplace to where it was a car. Perhaps that would have got solved sooner that way.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of a dynamic there too. So he was definitely on foot, and it leads me to my other point where we need to talk about the security theater at
hmm
Brown University.
hmm
He was able to go ahead and find a vulnerability there, and with that vulnerability, I mean, you're talking about an Ivy League school. In fact, our baby sister, went to that school, Ivy League school, billions in endowment. And yet, Boris and Holly didn't have the effective camera systems that other areas of the campus had. Officials went on to go ahead and say that it was an older structure, it was an older building, and thus they didn't have the necessary equipment there. I just think that that's of no excuse because the egress or even the ingress into that hall is right next to a residential community. Although being a very affluent residential community, um, sometimes you can get lulled into a false sense of security in these areas.
I agree. I agree. You know, again, one of the lessons learned is that I think all of the schools and everybody's going to have to get serious about security and making sure all the cameras are upgraded and everything like that. And unfortunately, we're in a society where we respond instead of prevent. Nobody really walks around and say, okay, hey, we need this in case this happens, or this can prevent this from happening. We become a society that unfortunately we respond to crime. We don't control and prevent it. and we've probably gone to the point to where controlling and preventing is criminalized or considered profiling or stuff like that. But in order to stop this from happening, it's going to have to be more proactive, preemptive, preventive methods going on, or this is going to continue to happen. Anyone can find a target rich, soft target area and strike. And until people are saying, okay, hey, we need this, because again, there are a lot of things that can just be prevented, because you got to be willing to do it. And that's true of anything. I mean, when my neighbor had a garden, the first thing he did was put up an electric fence because he knew the deer was going to rob it all the time. So, it's very clear. Hey, you can go get what you want, but make sure you cut off that electricity because that's an electric fence. Because he knew there was no way to have a garden out there without the deer coming. And there's just certain things that it's an inconvenience. People don't like it or whatever, but it's hard to have any place where it's a lot of people. And if you don't know who has a gun or who doesn't have a gun, or you don't have things in place to stop that type of stuff from happening, everything is just a chance.
Right, right. So not even a security guard was anywhere near there.
Absolutely.
And then I take a look at the video. And so he's walking, casing the whole entire neighborhood. And one of the complications that the police and investigators and even the agents are dealing with is the fact that because it's an affluent neighborhood, a lot of people they have the resources to go on vacation a lot. And so you had a lot of people that weren't there, probably down here visiting me down here in Florida. So, and another part is the gates are far, 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 far away from the front doors of these homes. I mean, the nice big homes. So your Ring camera is going to only see so much. And this is part of the problems that they discussed that they're having right now. So this is leading into a very difficult investigation in terms of, getting evidence right away. But you still got to go ahead and case the whole place for Teslas that have, active cameras on all the time. You got to do much more interviews and knocking on doors. And then you got to make that, and widen that, certainly that dragnet out to be a little bit further, especially if, it went into the residential system.
At the end of the day, you've got to be able to control the territory. And college campuses are going to have to start controlling the territory. Okay, because this is the second act of violence we've seen on a college campus in the recent few months. We just had Charlie Kirk's assassination, where a person was able to set up with a rifle on a college campus. Now you got this particular person. I just had to go see a friend of mine that works for Morehouse Spelman. And it's very interesting because when I went on campus to get to where they were, there was a guard, there was a gate around. I had to show an ID, and I had to say who I was there to see. Now they didn't have the whole campus like this, but they had different pockets of it surrounded like that. And a lot of that may be that first of all, it's in a very dangerous area anyway. There's a lot of historical Black colleges are located in high crime areas. Why that is, I don't know.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of that going on. But I was very impressed with the security that in order for me to get to that particular part of the campus, which there were office buildings and classes and stuff, you couldn't just go there. It had a complete fence. It had a person, and he would not let me in until I verified who exactly I was there coming to see. So just me strolling through the campus couldn't happen. And that's probably what a lot of these universities are like little cities.
Mhm.
And, I went and visited a university in Kansas where, I mean, you literally had to get an Uber just to get to the convention I was at. I stayed on campus, but I actually needed an Uber just to get to where the conference was being held that I was at. It was just that big. And so anyone can ride through or whatever, but in order to really secure that campus, that's what it's going to take. You're going to have to be able to control the ingress and egress, and know who's coming in and who's going out. And if you're not a student or a faculty member, you shouldn't even be there or have a reason to be there. I know that's very inconvenient. I know that nobody really wants to go through that, but if we don't get that type of control of the territory, there's no way to really protect it. You can't protect anything, up to and including a jail. That's how I protected the jail.
Mhm.
I cut, there's 4 or 5 ways to get inside the Clayton County Jail when I was a sheriff, but I cut it down to one. And everyone that went through that area was filmed and searched. And that's why there was no drugs, no cell phones, no nothing, because they couldn't get anything in. And that's the only way to protect any structure or any campus. The only way to protect it is you got to be able to control who comes in, who goes out. You got to know who they are, and you got to know what they're bringing in, and don't allow them to bring anything in.
Right. At the time of this taping, it's day 4. It's December 17th.
Mm-hmm.
And we are looking at, and generally, let me go ahead and explain what day 4 looks like. We're definitely talking about, we understand that this isn't a chaotic kid that just snapped. We know this person is a disciplined offender of some sort. But here's the dangerous phase of this. Isolation starts setting in.
Mm-hmm.
You got fatigue that starts building up with law enforcement. Paranoia increases in the neighborhood, certainly. He's watching coverage. He's reading the comments, you know? So, he's evaluating his mistakes or her mistakes or whoever it is. So this is all on stage for everybody to see, and they reinsert themselves into familiar spaces, or they make a risky move somehow to destabilize themselves. And so with that is, you have the potential of this going either way. I like to think that, this individual who's done this is not as bright as I think he might be.
Let's hope not. One thing that they taught us in homicide, and it turned out to be true, I'll never forget, I was in homicide school, and it seemed unbelievable, but then I started to see it all the time. And they always say, hey, anytime you're at a scene, if behind that white tape, there's a group of people watching, it's always take a picture there. Because they said
Same thing.
it is a high probability that the person that committed that murder is standing in that crowd watching. They're watching you work. They're watching you see what you got or whatever like that. And sure enough, one of the very first homicides that I worked, my first year in homicide, that was the case. The murderer was actually there across the yellow line and asking questions. Do they know anything? What happened or whatever? Because he's trying to figure out, do we know it's him? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then they also think, right. So that's what's so interesting and disturbing and scary for the safety of people around there, because if they don't know who it is, suppose it is someone that has some right to be there. Suppose it is, can they 100% say it's not a student? Can they 100% say it's not an ex-employee? Because right now, we don't know.
Right.
And if that is the case, unidentified, he could be walking around that campus right now with a sense of superiority, thinking, hey, I just did this and nobody doesn't even know it's me, and I'll just keep blending in.
Correct.
So it's important that this is solved, because if he's still out there, if he hasn't taken his life, if he is walking free, he's going to do something again eventually.
Sure. So
Because we don't even know the motive. Usually by this time we know the motive.
We
hey,
don't
it's
know.
an ex-employee that disgruntled. It's somebody that I'm mad at the NFL because I thought I had a head injury, or I had a health concern, so I want to kill the president of an insurance company or whatever. Right now, if we don't have a suspect, we don't really have a motive.
Right. We do know that he's stocky, 5'8". He wore a mask. But suspicion wouldn't come in for just wearing a mask, obviously, because first of all, he planned for concealment, and the second thing, he blended into the seasonal norms at the time up there. It's winter. And so you're going to be walking in crowds that some people are going to have masks to, that's part of the anonymity there. And then if you're in Providence, you know exactly what you're dealing with. But I did see all those clothes on him. So you got to dispose it somehow, right? Did he avoid his phone? Did he, what we got to look for is, did he return home differently? Did he change routine suddenly? Because predators don't vanish. They just hide in plain sight. And that's what you were just talking about.
That's exactly right. And, once they find him, and I believe they will, uh, those questions have to be answered for a lot of reasons so that there can be a debrief so that this type of stuff can be avoided. I can tell you this, when I was a sheriff, one thing that was very, very interesting is I had to change how we conducted manhunts because, again, you described it so well earlier, not just talking about the public, but even law enforcement, how you got fatigue, how you get tunnel vision and stuff like that. But a lot of times when a crime was committed and a manhunt would start, you got to really train because every officer gets in their car and they drive straight to the scene. Okay, but they forget while you're driving to the scene, the suspect is leaving the scene. And I can't tell you how many times I was in robbery and homicide and we got a suspect. And the ones that confessed were telling us, yeah, well, we got in the car, we drove it. As we were driving, we were driving past the police cars, speeding to what we just did. So, again, you got to tell everyone to slow down. Okay, everybody going to the scene is not going to solve the problem because if the robbery has already happened or homicide's already happened, there's not a lot you can do there unless you're doing actual crime scene work. So you got to train folks. Don't go straight to the scene. Let's spread out. See if we can get a description. Or do we see a car driving unusually fast, like it's trying to get away from something?
Glad you mentioned that.
Right.
Because in that image, the person of interest that they believe is responsible walked past a police cruiser. Just no lie, you know what I mean? So it does come to reason that you would go ahead and take a look at, hey, guess what? And I'm glad that you changed that policy because naturally, it is true. We'll try to get to that source as soon as possible, even to the detriment of us killing ourselves trying to get there.
And let me tell you something. No, you had something you want to say. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
go.
So let me tell you something else that law enforcement overlooks a lot. Right when you got these type of scenes, and now there's a manhunt that's instantly going on. Okay, the person is on foot. You don't have a vehicle description. So everybody gets locked into looking to this guy on foot. Okay, set up a perimeter, get a dog, whatever. How do you know he didn't make it to a vehicle? So where they missed the mark is, and I had to make sure they started doing this, is hey, we're not just looking for a guy on foot. We need a perimeter where no vehicle can get in or out of here without going through a road check. So you just don't start looking for a guy on foot. I need how many ways are there out of here? Okay, block it off. Anything that leaves here needs to go to the road check. We need to look in the car. We need to look in the trunk. We need to record. Even if we don't have anything to stop that person, we need that tag. We need a picture of that person because once the investigators get back together, okay, how many people left this place? Who were they? What time did they leave?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we got that tag information, if we got that person, when we investigate and figure out what was what, well, this person did go through the road check. We do have a picture. We do have something. So a lot of people, they get cornered or they get tunnel vision that we're looking for a guy on foot. Well, at some point, unless he lives nearby, he's got to get to a vehicle to get out of there. So you've got to worry about vehicle traffic. You're looking for a guy on foot and a car goes by and he's in the car. He might be in the trunk, the back seat. He may be holding a gun to someone you can't see saying, drive me out of here. So if you don't stop every vehicle that's leaving that scene, he's going to get away.
Correct. And, to go even deeper than that, we're taking all tag numbers that are even parked
Absolutely.
anywhere.
Absolutely.
We're making sure that and we're matching it up to addresses. We're going to addresses. We're going to go ahead and ask anything about their vehicles. Did you see a vehicle? out here? Was it parked in a particular spot? There's so many things that we do, and just I know this is a half-hour show, but there's so many things that we do to go ahead and narrow that down.
Absolutely. And there should be cameras somewhere that every car that comes on that campus, there's a camera recording the car and the tag, because that's what
At the very
investigators
least,
need. So if this happened within a certain time, every car that came on the campus in the last 8 hours, we need to see, okay, what kind of cars, and let's run all the tags. Because unless he lives in the immediate area, unless he lives in that high affluent area that's right next to that building and he just walked home and went home, which is a possibility,
possibility.
right? There needs to be a canvas there too. But just in case he left by car, every car on that campus during that particular time in a certain buffer area around that time, that tag needs to be ran. Those people need to be talked to. Hey, your car was here. Do you work here? What were you doing, or whatever? They have to
Yeah,
account
yeah.
for every vehicle and every person in order to eliminate suspects and ultimately identify a suspect.
I mean, we're talking about Providence, Rhode Island. We're
Right?
not talking about somebody in the middle of summer that they can walk 20 miles away.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's cold outside. Either they're living close by or they're getting to some type of transportation, whether it be a car, bus, whatever.
You
So we
got it.
do have those type of things going on. So there is a $50,000 reward on them. But my thing is, money doesn't catch ghosts. Intelligence does. Some of the things that we were just talking about, these are best practices to go ahead and to at least get our additional clues so we can go ahead and get closer to the truth and find out the suspect.
But now
But
the money, I got to debate you on that. The money's not a bad idea either way. Let me tell you, which is true of most crimes. They always leave something, and there's somebody that always knows something. And if that's the incentive for them to tell us something, somebody knows something. This guy has said something to someone or have acted a certain odd way around someone, and they're probably, you know what? It's probably him that did it. But sometimes these people, they based on their relationship or based on fear, well, I don't want to say nothing, but somebody knows something.
right,
And
right, you're right about that. And I,
right,
I guess what I'm saying too is with the way that you're thinking about that, it also eliminates people too, people of interest. That we
absolutely.
have, a roster of. So we got that going on also. So this is just one of those things where we're just going to see how it plays out. I think we're early into the investigation and we want to see how it comes.
Well, I'm praying and cheering on law enforcement, because the sooner they solve this, the better that community can rest. Really, the better we all can rest, because there's a killer walking around there free.
For
And if
sure.
he hasn't taken his own life, he's a threat to public safety.
Right, right. All right, that'll be it for this show for today. Hopefully, we'll get this type of information sometime soon. But if you have any other tips or want to go ahead and drop it down to anybody, of course, the FBI has a tip line. Please give them a call on that end of it. Uh, Subscribe, like, comment on the channel, share. And certainly you can go onto YouTube and then we have merch there to go ahead and pick up. So without further ado, brother, I'll see you later.
Strength and honor.